Well, hi and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to this podcast where we drink coffee. And in this series, this limited series, I'm speaking about transition, about the journey from there to over there, from where you are to where God is leading you. In this series of 8 episodes, we're going to talk about transition, sensing the new thing, seeing the new thing, how to manage fear, definitely want to stop opening closed doors, and the art of waiting well. Join me on this journey as we drink coffee and talk about transition. Hi and welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to the afternoon that I sit in my studio and got a bit of a pattern going on, which I'm really enjoying, coming home middle of the afternoon on a Monday and recording these episodes. I'm doing a lot of planning, and look, to be honest with you, anytime we can take time out to journey with God, walk with Him, and check in with Him with regarding the steps we're taking, it's got to be a good thing. And so here we are, Coffee with Phil, episode 109, and we've been in a series, and we're concluding a series, I think, on transition. I really felt to start the year with a series on transition, and so I thought I would shift up the podcast and focus on a theme for a period of episodes. In this case, I've chosen 8 episodes to talk about transition, and this is number 8. Today we are going to talk about the wonderful subject. I'm sure you saw the title of this podcast and you couldn't wait to add it to a playlist so you could listen to it quickly. Pick up your cross, says Jesus. What an attractive invitation that is. Don't expect the stats to be high on this episode. You got to pick your titles very carefully. What I would say, though, is with regards to this series on transition, I'm wondering, do you have any major questions? Were there expectations you had around transition that I didn't think to plan for? I'm always open to getting feedback and getting direction. And there's been a couple of times that I've done episodes on the back of something that someone has asked me or sent me in response to what's going on in the journey of the podcast as you enjoy Coffee with Phil. Speaking of coffee, we were talking about coffee on the weekend as I was with one of the listeners who is a regular, and he was referencing this guy that drinks too much coffee and chats a lot, and we talked about what was going on in his world. But I got to tell you, not to talk too much about coffee, but today I got a notification that a delivery had been made to my home, and I'm really excited to say I've got some new beans. I've got a coffee roaster that is made by a company in New Zealand. We've talked about these guys before. Cafe Logic, cafe with a K and 2 Fs. Cafe Logic, based in the South Island. Brilliant guys, amazing service, really leading edge product. And it's what you would call a batch roaster. So my machine, with no additions, roasts about 90 grams of beans. So I would do a couple of 100 grams a week for me, considering I'm not at home all week. But if you're in a cafe, you might be chewing through a couple of kilos a day. So not really suitable if you're going to use it for a cafe. But for me, for family roasting, it's perfect. It takes about 10 to 12 minutes to do a batch of beans. But of course, that means you buy green beans. And you might not be surprised to know that coffee beans grow all over the world. And they work best in warm climates. I've been in India, and there's just coffee trees popping up in people's backyards or along the pathway with the beautiful bright red berries on them. One time I visited a plantation in Uganda. A friend of mine was approached with the request to invest in 10 acres of coffee plants. And got to say, it wasn't a highlight of the trip because the trees weren't looking too healthy. Not quite sure if the local farmers were doing their best to take care of them. Needless to say, neither me nor my friend were investing in that plantation based on what I saw. Now, you get a lot of beans in Indonesia where I travel also. There's some great beans that come out of Kenya. But I've been buying my beans from South America. Now, not directly, through an agent, but I'm quite a fan of the Brazilian beans that I've got right now. But I'd also say to you, did you realize that the altitude at which these beans grow makes a significant difference not only to the type of bean that you're getting, but how you roast it? Now, disclaimer, I'm not a geek. I follow the geeks, and I benefit from their wisdom. But what I've come to understand is that there are different roasting profiles, which is like a formula or a menu of how you cook the beans so that you get the best flavor out of those beans, and you vary it. Well, the clever guys do. They vary it based on the altitude of the beans. So the beans that I just received today come from Brazil, and they were growing at less than 1,200 meters in altitude. And so I've got a program that I can install into my coffee roaster. You just download it and plug it in with a thumb drive, and it will roast the beans at the right rate. And so one of the key things is about the rate of the heat increase and the cooling. So I'm really excited because I just got 5 kilos of fresh beans of a new supplier. So I'm looking forward to trying those, and you can be sure I'll let you know how it goes. Well, I got a bit distracted talking about coffee, but welcome to Coffee with Phil. Today we finish the series on transition, and right at the beginning of my planning, I had mapped out that the final session would be called Pick Up Your Cross. Again, maybe not the most attractive title for those looking for an alternative pathway in transition, but I truly believe this is the best pathway in transition. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. I'm going to reference where this comes from, and then I'm going to finish with really wrapping up what this means for your transition if you're in transition. Friends, I've got to tell you, the more and more people I speak to at the moment, leaders in business and in faith, God is really stirring his people. There's a shaking and a stirring. There's a holy discontent going on. Some people are just being forced to see shift and change. So some of us are recognizing a change in season. So don't miss what God is doing. And you go back and listen to the podcast I did called The Sons of Issachar. Just go to the channel and search for Issachar. It's not a common word, and it'll be on there. Or just Google search Coffee with Phil, Sons of Issachar, and the episode will pop up, and you can grab it on YouTube or any other channel you choose to. So you've got to be in tune with what God's doing. You've got to be in step with what God's doing, and that's where this comes in. The pick up your cross. So for those of you that have read the Bible before or sat in a space where there's been sermons or homilies shared, you'll recognize these as the words of Jesus. Jesus is having a conversation, and it's specifically recorded in Matthew chapter 16. In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus is having a chat with his bros, his homies, his disciples, and he says, "Who do you say I am?" And so Simon Peter's like, "Well, everyone reckons, you know." And he goes, "No, who are you?" And there's this revelation of the Messiah, and then Jesus starts to explain what the absolute power is that comes out of that revelation, which is really important for us, but absolutely nothing to do with this episode. But here's the thing. In the back end of that conversation, Jesus says to his disciples, so this is Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me," so that means to follow me, "let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whomever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?" And this is like, again, this is probably going to go down like a warm rat sandwich on a Sunday afternoon. Who wants to be told you must deny yourself and you must take up the cross, the symbolization of death, eternal sacrifice, none greater, pain, possibly humiliation, and death? You must take up your cross to follow Jesus. And should you choose not to take it up, the implication is you will not be following Jesus. If anyone would follow me, come after me, he must deny himself and pick up his cross. This is pretty tough. But what I really wanted to do on the back of this is when it comes to transition, if you're feeling like you're shifting into a season or a new season or shifting out of a season, I was speaking to a guy on Friday, had a long chat about the journey we're both on, and he was saying, look, I just felt like the grace has lifted in this area of my life. And what he means by that is that he just didn't feel like God's favor was on it. I didn't feel like he had the freedom to move in that, and it was a sign to him that God's hand had lifted in order to move him in a new way into a new season. So he's sensitive to that. So what I'm really wanting you to pick up from this passage is two things, because I'm trying to be practical. And so what I've been doing is I've been leaning in to what's happening spiritually in this season, and I'm searching, God, not just where am I, but who am I? Key thing. And so in that, I've been asking two questions. And the two questions come from Matthew 16 here, this chapter, right? Jesus says, if you come after me, deny yourself, follow your cross, whoever save your life, lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake, says Jesus, will find it. So the first question I've been asking myself in reflection, in prayer, is what is Jesus saying? What is the word that I've received from Jesus? And as I move into agreement with him, I get a sense of that sacrificial lifestyle that Jesus is talking to here with regards to denying ourselves and picking up our cross. That's the first way to look at it. But I want you to also think about the entire context of Matthew 16, because the revelation of absolute critical importance is the revelation that Jesus is Messiah, and he says to Peter, again, the words of Jesus matter, on this revelation I will build my church. Well, what's the revelation? That he's Messiah. And the gates of Hades, meaning death and destruction and division, will not prevail. And whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will have been loosed in heaven. And the way that I've been interpreting that and teaching that recently is we've got to align ourselves with the motives and the momentum of heaven. What's the season we're in? Where's heaven moving? Where is heaven not moving? Where is the grace? Where is not the grace? So the question is, quite simply put, what does heaven want right now? And so what does Jesus say? And what does heaven want? Because if you loose on earth that which is already loosed in heaven. Can you see the alignment there, the agreement there? What I'm wanting to do is to speak, behave, move, and pray in line with and in agreement with what heaven is already doing. First in the spiritual, then in the natural. So we're not manipulating heaven with our prayers. Our prayers are about agreeing with heaven in order that we would flow with heaven, the momentum of heaven, the timing of what God is doing, so that we would align our hearts with God in the transition he's got us in. And that's the key. So what does Jesus say and what does heaven want? This is how we pick up our cross. You see, the cross is a picture of sacrifice. And again, that's just another word that tastes like a rat sandwich in the back of our throat, because we don't like the idea of sacrifice. But ultimately, guys, this is how God has called us to live. Because we must die to ourselves, we must surrender our will, we must embrace the will and the lifestyle and the disciplines of Jesus as our teacher. And we've got to say, yes, Lord. And so, again, I've got this written down a couple of times in my notes, but we've got to start thinking the prayer of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's a beautiful demonstration of Jesus commanding his will to come in agreement with heaven. He says, Father, take this cup from me, but not my will be done. And he's like, man, the suffering is intense, but I'm willing to bend myself to the plan of heaven, and therefore I pray, not my will, but yours be done. And this is the best way to pray in transition if you're going to pick up your cross. You might be saying, God, I don't really feel that good about this. I don't know that I'm confident. I don't know that I'm comfortable. There's no certainty in transition. So what I would say to you is this. Change is not about comfort. Change is all about your complicity to the will and plan of God. So friends, again, I'm really sorry about this because this is not a happy message. This is me saying that I'm learning to bend myself to the will of heaven. And I would be praying. I mean, if you were sitting with me in my prayer chair, it would be very uncomfortable because two of us in the same chair is just a bit awkward. Even my dog, when it sits up there, I'm like, get out. There's no room. I want to be comfortable in my chair. If I'm praying, I want to be. Well, how's that for an oxymoron? If I'm praying, I want to be comfortable. That's actually not true because I'm praying, not my will, but yours be done, Lord. I can't see where I'm going. I don't know where I'm going. I know I'm following you, and therefore I would say, not my will, but yours be done. Change is not about my comfort. Whilst I might be in a comfortable chair, I've got to understand that the Lord is leading me into further degrees of sacrifice in order that my complicit response is, that means I bend myself to respond to Him. It's what I need to do, and I'm going to give you some practical stuff on that at the end of this episode. I was mulling over this as I was making my afternoon coffee and thinking and preparing myself for speaking with you guys, and I had this thought that it's very, very similar to, let me look this up, it's very, very similar to the model of a healthy marriage that Paul writes about in the letter to the church in Ephesus, in what we would call Ephesians chapter 5, in verse 25. He says, husbands, love your wives. Not a bad instruction. Husband, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Yoicks. And the Message translation says, a love marked by giving, not getting. And so the idea is implied in here. It's pretty, well, it's not implied, it's clear that the sacrifice that Christ made for the church in his death is the same sacrifice husbands must make for their wives. Why do I say that to you? Transition isn't about your comfort. It's actually about a greater degree of death of your will in order to submit and serve the purposes of God as he has ordained for your journey. I mean, God's not stopping the rotation of the earth just for you. God's kingdom will advance even if you're slow and tardy, but he absolutely wants you to respond in a positive way, because that's just going to be a greater outcome for you. And again, I'll get to that right at the end of the episode. So I promised you I would give you a couple of stories and examples because this is really real for me, and it's always been real for me because I'm not someone that likes to sit still, which means I embrace transition, but with the embracing comes the risk of not doing it well. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking way back, like long time ago. Kathy and I were newlyweds. And the first year of our marriage, We sold our house and bought another house, which was pretty stressful as a young couple and didn't have a lot of money. Funny part is we bought a house across the road, so we literally just picked up all our stuff and carried it across the road. You'd be glad you weren't available that day to carry all the furniture. And then I got really unsettled in my work, and I could tell there was a really deep unsettling going on. And I'm relatively immature in my faith in those days. We didn't have a lot of really deep spiritual friends around us, which I always recommend now, knowing what it's like to live without that. And I started to feel like the pathway I was on in my corporate job wasn't going to lead me in a very good way. And we started to outsource a lot. I was in training and development and human resources. We started to outsource a lot of stuff. And I'm like, well, this pretty soon they're going to outsource me or my function. And I realized also in the office or the organization that I was part of, in the offices in Wellington there, it was a corporate ladder that got narrower and narrower the more you climbed it. And the only way to get to the next rung was to kind of take the attitude of dog eat dog. I'll stab you in the back and get rid of you so that I can get the promotion that I want. It just wasn't a way that I wanted to live my life. So I started seeking God in prayer with a list. And I was like, I really feel like, God, it's time to move. And just newly married, but I've got some preferences around what I want to do. And so I made a list and I started praying my list. And what happened was, at the end of that year, is a job came up. It was exactly what I'd been asking for, and it ticked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things on the list. It was amazing. I was really excited about the answer to prayer. The only thing was it was in a different city. So I had to convince my newish wife that we had to move away from her family, and we went on that journey. Now, I tell you that story because I wanted to say to you that whilst I'd written myself a list, I've reflected on it, and I'm pretty confident. I'm like, God, I know that it's only you that can open the right doors for me. And so I would say to you that the attitude that's really important is to say, my journey is not my own. Now, I want to give you a completely contrasting story. Many years later, we're well established in Hamilton, in the city we moved to in 1998, and well established in church, well established with family, kids in school. I've got an extensive background in property and small business ownership. And I sense that unsettling. I sense that disturbing. And things started to shift around me, and grace and favor moved. And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And out of that came a leading towards full-time ministry and pay, a church leadership, as that is what you do, I mean, I'd been in ministry for a long time, but along the side of owning business and raising family, and we're always in ministry, all of us. But this was like specific church leadership, and I'm like, this is not me. Like, I'm trained in different areas. I've got passions and I've got dreams in different areas, and I was on a pathway for significant wealth and building priority in that and using that for kingdom purposes. And I tell you what, over that season, the Lord really bent me, and it was a bending of my will, and it was a bending of my motives, and it was a bending of my priorities. Until I got to the point where I realized my journey is not my own. It's not my will that has to be satisfied, it's God's. And the reason why I wanted to tell you those two stories, because they're quite different, and they're in different seasons of my life, but I absolutely am convinced that God moves through both ways. Perhaps the first story, where I was a bit younger, a little less mature, the Lord was allowing me to dream with Him so that He could lead me into a space that He wanted me to move into, which required us to move and relocate and build new networks. Whereas in the second season, I had to give up my identity. I had to give up my future plans. I had to give up my priorities. I had to put them on the altar. I had to deny myself, according to Matthew 16, and pick up my cross, choosing sacrifice over safety and change over comfort. And so I think what I'm saying in this is that the heading on my notes is my journey is not my own. But I've learned to recognize the stirring and the discomfort, or when grace lifts in a certain area. It's like God's taken his hand off a certain area of my life, and I'm looking and I'm going, okay, things are not the same. And so what do I need to keep my eyes open to? And instantly, I can tell you what my response is now. Instantly, I'm shifting my prayer to what is Jesus saying and what does heaven want? That's what I've learned, because I realize that if I'm praying, not my will but yours be done, then the pathway is going to be, it's not going to be a smooth pathway, but I'm not going to be fighting against God. You know, it's like if you want to go with the flow, you're going to have a much easier ride than if you're trying to fight against a current of what God is doing. So the key thought is my journey is not my own. What am I seeking? I'm seeking God's will, and I need to flow with him. There's another way that we can look at this through the words of Jesus. And look, I don't apologize for quoting Jesus, because I find he's always got good truth for us. So John chapter 12, there's a conversation. There are some Greeks in the area. They kind of obviously Jewish, because they're worshipping at the Jewish feast, and they're approaching the disciple Philip because he's kind of affiliated with them. He's got a Greek name, and they can communicate with him easily, right? So anyway, that's what's happening. And so there's a conversation going on, and Jesus decides to drop another truth bomb. And this is very similar to the first one, but it's in a completely different context. Jesus says this in John chapter 12, verse 24, I tell you the solemn truth. Unless a kernel of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains by itself alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. The one who loves his life destroys it, and the one who hates his life in this world guards it for eternal life. If anyone wants to serve me, he must follow me, and where I am, my servant will be too. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. So this is another way to look at it. The same thing, picking up your cross. And I love this analogy. Jesus always using farming analogies, because everyone had to grow their own food. If a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it will produce. And in the New English translation I'm reading on the screen here, there's this phrase that kind of pops out because of the way they've formatted the page. It says, if it dies, it produces. Now that would be a very good phrase for you to write in your journal. Perhaps you should text it to yourself. Maybe you should make it a mantra that you message to yourself all the time. It's like something you learn to say often. If it dies, it produces. You know, I mean, is this not just the story of Jesus? That which went into the ground in death rose with victorious life. I mean, hello, that's the gospel message of Jesus right there. The power of salvation, the new life that you can have only comes on the other side of your death. So if it dies, it produces. And that also reminds me, look, I'm getting reminded of the Bible every corner now, because Hebrews chapter 11 is the chapter on faith. The father of our faith, Abraham, faith operated powerfully in Abraham. This is Hebrews 11, verse 17, and just for fun, I'm reading it from the Passion. Faith operated powerfully in Abraham, for when he was put to the test, he offered up Isaac. Now, pause. Let me just explain this. Abraham has a son. He's a son of a promise. God says, go and kill him, offer him as a sacrifice. And it says he offered up Isaac. When he was put to the test, he chose to sacrifice. Even though he received God's promise of descendants, he was willing to offer up his only son. For God had promised, through your son Isaac, your lineage will carry your name. Abraham's faith made it logical to him that God could raise Isaac from the dead. And symbolically, that's what happened. This is amazing. I love this. This is another way to look at it. If it dies, it produces. This passage here in Hebrews 11, because you don't get this perspective when you read the OG story in Genesis 22. What it says here is he actually received him back from the dead. He believed that God would bring him back from the dead, and figuratively speaking, that is what happened. It's just a beautiful way to look at it. Through death, faith comes and brings life. That is the point here. New life comes. And I've written down a little phrase here because I'm giving you a bunch of good stuff here, guys. Isaac was alive from off the altar. What's the important point there? He was on the altar. If you're not willing to put up your motives, your dreams, your aspirations, your security, your comfort, your will, if you're not willing to put it on the altar, then God can't resurrect what he knows is your new life. Kathy and I were speaking about this. We were driving in the car the other day, and we're just talking about our journey, and we didn't have any answers for ourselves. It wasn't a pep talk. It was kind of like one of those chats, and you think long and slow and talk little, but it was really cool. And we were talking about change, and we talked about comfort, and I said, look, I think every change and transition that God leads us through must cost us something. And so we debated that for a while, and we looked at examples in our journey. And, I think the cost here for Abraham in Hebrews 11, Genesis 22, is actually, as far as he was concerned, he considered Isaac to be dead. Verse 19 of Hebrews 11 in the New King James, it says, concluding that God was able to raise him even from the dead. Even from the dead. He could raise him from the dead, so that's the cost. It's like, if it's going to die, it's going to die. If my dream's going to die, my dream's going to die. I choose to follow God over all else. What's it going to cost us to move into those promises of God? And I really do hope that you're deeply pursuing this with God. Not just, if it happens, or if God's going to open a door, I guess I'll just walk through it. There's much, much more to it than that. I think God is really longing for those that would pursue him above all else, to find him and him alone, and through him, they walk into this new space. I think that's what's really, really important. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they chose not to worship the statue, and they got chucked into the furnace. And in that sacrifice, in that choice of willing not to seek comfort, but to seek complicit instructions and obedience, in that they found the personal relationship with Jesus. Because when Nebuchadnezzar looks in the fire, he goes, look, there's a shape like a man, a fourth man. Did we not throw three of them in the fire? What? Jesus, a theophany, the person of Jesus was with them in the fire. And that's an example of what it's like to choose to follow God and to choose to be obedient, to pick up your cross, regardless of what it's going to cost you, and be confident that even in death, Christ is with you. And so even in that fire, Christ was with them. And that's a good picture for us to pick up our cross and follow Jesus. So as I land this series and bring this to an end, I want to answer this question. What specifically does all of this mean for transition? And I've got 4 statements here, and the key outcome is in the last one. So let me work through these 4 concluding statements as I share them with you. Hope you're doing okay. If you're still listening, ups to you, because this is not an easy subject to put into practice. It's easy for me to talk about. Not so easy to listen to. And I'm listening to myself, really thinking I'm going to have to pick up a few pointers from myself here. But it's actually really difficult to put into practice. So good luck with that. May God give you strength. Okay, let's close this out. What specifically does this mean for transition? The first thought that I wanted to unpack with you: God doesn't need your permission, but desires your participation. God doesn't need permission. He is going to move. And people say, oh, but God's polite, God's a gentleman. Yeah, but he's also sovereign. He's balancing the eternal age in the palm of his hand. There's 8 billion people alive on the earth, and several billion that used to be on the earth, and a lot more that will be. He's balancing all of that, and in the midst of that, he wants you to be part of what he's doing. And he's patient, and he's compassionate, and he's merciful, but to a point. God doesn't need your permission, but he desires your participation. He's wanting you to bend to his will because he knows it's best for you. So really, maybe what you want to do is you want to just get yourself in a quiet place one day and say, God, are there any areas of my life where I'm not bending to you? Are there any aspects of my life that I'm not yielding, like I'm holding on to or I'm hiding? Is there something that I'm putting away in the bottom drawer so you can't see it? I mean, how stupid is that as a thought? Because God is everywhere and sees everything. The point is, God doesn't need your permission, wants your participation. What are you holding back on? What are you holding back on? The second thought that I want to share with you, and this kind of is part of a summary of some of the other episodes in this series, particularly fear and risk. So what I'd say to you is face your fear and all other feelings, but allow your spirit to command your soul. I have said this for several years now. As soon as I learned it, I shared it with you, and I continue to integrate this into my life and my well-being. Feelings are a tool that God uses as a signpost, and the signpost is always pointing to something. So when I'm feeling afraid, it's a signpost that points to something that God wants me to work on. Why am I afraid? Where is my trust in God? And why is it not strengthening me? So all your feelings are useful. So you've got to face your fear. And I did a whole episode on fear in this series. So go back and look at it. But also your other feelings. What about uncertainty and insecurity? And what about my income? Or what about my house? Or what about my children? What if I have to move countries in this transition? I want you to face all those. Don't hide them. But then what you've got to do is, once you've processed that and you've got it very, very clear, you've then got to allow your spirit to command your soul. Now, what I mean by that is your spirit is connected to God's spirit. Okay, that's why we pray in tongues. That's why we receive the Spirit when we're born again. That's our That's the channel by which we're united with Christ through our spirit being connected to the Spirit of Jesus. So what you need to do is allow your spirit person to command your soul into obedience. So I see my fear, I feel my fear, and I'm acknowledging it, but I'm not giving it power over my destiny. I'm choosing to pray in the Spirit, to allow my spirit to command my soul, my emotions, and my internal man, to command my soul to come in alignment with heaven. What is heaven saying? What does heaven want in this moment? And I want my spirit to align my body and my soul with that. Okay, so this is a big deal. This is about moving into spiritual warfare in your own space so that you don't wreck the journey because of your lack of sleep or your arguments with yourself or fear or any other emotion controlling you. But allow your spirit to rise up. Build up your spirit, man, through worship, through the reading of God's word, through prayer, through putting aside the flesh. That's why some people need to do a lot more fasting, because fasting is about putting to death the motive of the flesh in order that your spirit would become stronger than your flesh. The third thought that I wanted to share with you as I wrap this up is all about FOMO. And now, interestingly, fear of missing out. F stands for fear. FOMO. FOMO will hold you in the old and prevent the new. I remember when the Lord was wooing me and calling me out of a life of sinfulness into a life of salvation, my weakest excuse, which was the best one I had, was I don't want to miss out on what all my friends are doing. It was fear of missing out. I was afraid of letting go of my current life because I thought my new life wouldn't be as good. What a ridiculous thought. God is a loving Father who has all of creation at his command. If he's asking you to let go of something, it's because he's got better things for you, friend. He's got better things for you. He's not asking you to give up your nice house and your comfort and your beautiful car, for instance. I'm just using those examples, to go into another life that's going to be worse. Now, it might look different, but you will find new life in the new season that far outweighs what you thought was your best life. FOMO will hold you back in the old and prevent you from reaching into the new things with God. And the final thought, and this is really the clincher of the series, is this. Glory to glory. We're called to move from glory to glory. We're escalating in our connection with the glory of God. This is not the glory of man, this is the glory of God. Going from glory to glory comes as we grow in God. Key point. Glory to glory comes as we grow in God. And, friends, this is my most important point. The most critical aspect of your transition journey is your personal relationship with Jesus. Don't focus your efforts on what comes from your life, but who is in your life. And we say pray not according to what you get, but make your prize Jesus himself. Jesus is the prize that you should be focused on. So, I did focus a little bit on this. I've got a note here to refer you back to Coffee with Phil episode 105. And in that episode, somewhere near the end, I talked about following the rabbi's footsteps. And I've shared that picture with quite a few people in conversation because, the idea is, if you get confused and you're not close to the rabbi, you can't see his footprints. But the closer you are to the rabbi, Jesus, your rabbi, your Messiah, the closer you are, the more easily you can follow in his footsteps. And the point of that is intimacy that leads to obedience. So focus on intimacy, friends. Look, the whole point of faith is not what we get or even where we end up. Where we end up will allow us the fruit of our lives, which is face to face with Jesus. So I just want to commend you for going on the journey of transition. I want to encourage you to keep going, to hold on to what Jesus has said and what heaven wants, and allow the Holy Spirit to bend you to the will of God in order that your life would demonstrate the fruit of what God has prepared for you to the glory of God around you, so that others will see what an amazing journey you're on, and that your life points to God himself. And may that be your testimony. May God richly bless you as you go. May you always drink good coffee. And I hope to have you back next week when we dive into a new series, and I'm going to talk to you about that next week. So make sure you come back and enjoy Coffee with Phil. Until then, take care and go well.